All right, so we finally got this process down on how to make an oil filter cover. So we're going to get set up, and we're going to go from this big old chunk of aluminum to shiny little oil filter cover for the Viragos. So all this is set up here on the lathe. We're going to use this little 80-year-old South Bend lathe, and then just a manual mill and some fixturing. So we got her set up right now. I'm all indicated in for the most part on my gauge, and I've already faced off this back surface, so we're ready to start cutting. We'll get set up, get the camera angle in there, and we'll make us an oil filter cover. That should be 250, and it is 250. So we're shooting for 244. And there we go. There's our first big cut. Now we just got the little cuts to go. So let's bring it on in. All right, so after a little under 8 hours of lathe time and 2 trash cans full of aluminum curlies, we end up with 8 started covers. And now we got to start working on the outside cover portion. So the next stop is to head to the drill press, where we're going to start poking some holes in here. So it's starting to look a little more like a cover. So now you can see that it's got the extra mounting hole for the mill, and then it's got the lower hole, and then the 2 on top. This is where the Crescent is going to go, and then the 2 small ones for the jack screws. So we are all set up for this one. We just need to do that 7 more times, and we'll be ready to go to the next step, which will be headed to the mill. All right, so the next step is an easy one. All we got to do is drill the flow hole for the oil right through here. So using the fixture, we got it set up where when I set up in the fixture hole, it's going to drill it just right. So all I got to do is line up my fixture. And there we go. We got our cross drilling done. Just got to do it 7 more times and we'll have these 8 with the cross drills. So now we're back to the mill and it's time to start counterboring some holes. So this one has to be counterbored right up here because the crescent shape is going to stay high. These other ones over here I'm not worried about because they're going to go down low. I'll machine all that away. But then I also have to counterbore my little extra hole here that's going to mount it to stay stable when I'm doing the milling. So we're already set up. What I did is got it zeroed in with a pin, and so I'm right on the line there. And all I'm going to do is just switch out for a 1/2 inch end mill, and we're going to put a counterbore in there. And there we go. Now we just got to do that 7 more times and we'll be ready to cut away this little extra material. And you'll see why I'm going to do that when we get down to the profiling part. And there we go. So now we got that edge relieved off. And that's going to help us when we go to the profiling part. So for the next step, we finally get this oil cover to start looking like a oil cover instead of some Swiss cheesed up looking aluminum. And so what I did, I'm set back on center. And so now I'm going to cut the crescent in there. And so to do that, this is what this extra big hole over here is for, is I'm going to center up on that. And so now we're centered up on the bigger one and we just need to bolt it down. Now we got our part in and we're going to use this one bolt hole here because the fly cutter doesn't get near it. It's up on top of the crescent. And that's where that extra hole comes in right here. I have to clip it down low. That way I can fly over the top of that bolt and still get the cover done. So now all we got to do is just move the table over to the right position and we'll be ready to take a fly cutter. And there we go. Now we got our crescent shape cut in there. So next thing we got to do is take this edge off and then we're going to sand it while we still have it in here and flat, and then we will switch out and do the last steps. So the next step is to round that edge of that crescent over. So next on the list is to try to get rid of a few of those tool marks because we want to make it kind of shiny. And so I got a sander ring set up right here with a piece of 320 on it. And so we're going to come in here and just sand those surfaces down smooth. And there we go. We got a nice satin finish. And so now what we need to do is tap the holes for the jack screws. So by starting it in the mill, it ensures that it's nice and straight, perpendicular to the surface. And then I can finish it on out so I don't end up threading my fixture. Well, all right, so now we got our jack screws in and we are on the last steps. The next step, which is the final step, is to profile it. So we'll finish up these others and then we'll go to profile. All right, so we are now down to the last hard step, which is to profile around the edges of it. So that's where these little guys come into play. And what I do is put that profiler up underneath it, and then I just got a router, and we're going to slide it in and let it run on the bearing and make the profile. So this is where having a CNC mill or one of those little cool benchtop CNC things that come in really, really handy. But it can be done with just the roller type router and taking it easy. Now the only thing left to do would be to sand the edges, and then we'll just buff off the surface on the top. So we'll get set up here and start making the profile. So after a few minutes, maybe 15 minutes or so of routing, we'll slide the router back out. And there we go. So there's our little template. Let's blow him off and see what he looks like. And there we have it. A nice little custom oil cover. And all we got to do is just sand these edges down a little bit and then give it a little buff, and we'll be done. So for the others, the next step would be to take this with the other template and put a hole in the middle for the gauge, and then the one with the remote mount is kind of special, and it's going to have the mount over here for the remote mount oil line. After a little bit of polishing and sanding, we end up with a little family of oil covers. So there's the buffed out one, and there is the satin one that's just as sanded, and we got one with the gauge mounted on it, and then an option for an oil cooler lines to be added, and then the remote mount one is already on the bike. So I'll show some pictures of them mounted on the bikes at the end of the video. Well, all right. Well, thanks for watching.